It is a pleasure. It is indeed, but I'm sure you would agree can't you see why and then we go to, in the following video, the good news. Good news, good news. Bad news has been around so long. Good news. Some history books tells us, some history books will tell us, as the history books tell us, news, be privy to the evening news, newspaper, and have the local news, and have world news. So in dispensing news, the good news. 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 The good news was definitely worth declaring. Declare the good news. Good news. Good news.
There's violence. And there's death that individuals have to contend with.
Well, what is this good news that we've been talking about for just a few minutes?
Good news in regard to the good news. And as the good news, and let's read of the description that this good news, the good news. Good news, the one bringing good news, words such as the good news of peace, peace, series, hearts, Jesus Christ, precious, the feet.
The good news.
Is this not good news? Good news. The good news. The good news. Good news. The good news. The good news. We invite you, please, to take out your programs. Now, if you look at the program, as you see in your program, you see right there in your program. At this point, we invite you again to take out your program and let's review the program together of our convention. Good news, and that was indeed good news. The good news.
The good news.
Good news is worth declaring. Let's move on.
The good news.
And this good news, as we mentioned, is the good news. Look at the good news. Good news. Good news.
Now, at this point, we must just take a moment to talk about
the good news. The good news. Good news in what sense? Which will be described in the scope,
the importance, and the impact of the message that we preach to others when it comes to declaring the good news.
We have a power-packed day today, don't we?
Wonderful day of declaring the good news information. Let's move on. The good news. Be submissive to the good news. Good news to defeat bad news. Now, moving on, we see the good news wherever we are. What will you do for the sake of the good news?
You can become effective ministers in preaching the good news.
So once again, another power-packed day in the good news. In this particular symposium, we will learn how we can imitate 7 servants of God who were portrayed in episode 1 of the good news.
Bad news.
Now we move on to the good news. Well, what do you think? Are you ready? Are you excited to hear about the good news? Well, we say strap in. You're in for a wonderful ride over the next 3 days. As you'll be able to see there. And isn't that how you feel? The good news, the importance of the good news as much as possible. We like to just make this one note about the good news. Now, we invite you to sit back and enjoy part 1 of episode 1 of the good news.
Good news for people who love bad news.